and welcome to Open Line. I'm Starlene Stringer. Living in a major metropolitan area, we may not always realize it, but wildlife is always nearby. Oftentimes inhabiting our neighborhoods. We share Irving with a number of critters. Some you may see every day and others you may not realize. We're about to talk about urban wildlife on this edition of Open Line and what you need to know to stay safe and coexist with Irving's native wildlife. Joining me today from the Animal Services Department are Manager Corey Price, Field Operations Supervisor Laurie Hullinger, and Officer Lindsey Hayes. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Well, it's my pleasure. And well, first off, Corey, we want you to talk to our viewers about the wide range of animal-related issues that your department actually handles.
We handle everything from dogs and cats, which is definitely the most common calls, to all the different types of native species in the city. So that can be everything from raccoons, hawks, to smaller things that maybe you don't see all the time, like the skunks. So there's all kinds of wildlife around our city, and Animal Services is here to serve all of those different types of calls and every species of animal in the city.
And boy, are we grateful and thankful for y'all. Okay, Laurie, I'm going to come to you next because I want to know, what's the role of an Animal Services officer and what types of things do you encounter?
It's we deal with really a huge range of things, from just stray animals and trying to reunite them with their owners. Some more unpleasant cruelty issues, animals abandoned, wildlife in need of care, whether it be rescue or to be taken to a rehabber. Injured animals, animals have been hit by cars, neighborhood complaints about noise that are related to their animals. So there's a huge gamut of things that we do address.
Good. Okay. Well, that helps a bit. And I want to go to Lindsey to get even more information, because when we talk about urban wildlife, what exactly does that include when it comes to animals here in Irving?
Yeah, so it includes a wide range of species. So just like native to here, you'll find possums, raccoons, skunks, coyotes, bobcats, things of that nature. It's just kind of a wide range of species here.
Yeah, well, for me, I'd like to think that it seldom happens. Like maybe y'all see one of these creatures like maybe once every 10 years, but I have a feeling it's probably a little more often than that. So how common is it for someone to see, say, a bobcat or some kind of wildlife out there?
Yeah, all the time, actually. Yeah, we get calls about spottings quite consistently. But for like the spottings of the coyotes and bobcats, we get those calls all the time. But typically they're not going to harm you or anything like that. Usually we'll just explain to residents hazing tactics and so forth, how to keep them kind of away from you. But
we're going to get more into that in a minute, because we all want to know that, I'm sure. But can you tell us, what are they looking for specifically? What kind of prey or what kind of food? What are they searching for?
Yeah, so it depends on the species. So possums are actually really good to have around. They'll eat a lot of things that people don't like. So the snakes, rats, cockroaches, they're actually really good to have around. So if you see one in your yard, it's a good thing.
Okay, I have actually seen a possum in my yard, so it's good to know that they were out there, I think. So there's a good chance there could also have been a snake or a roach or something else. I'm not sure. I'm feeling comforted by that, but thank you for the effort. It's all right. Okay, so we're going to go to Laurie. And Laurie, I want to know, what should someone do if they see one of these types of animals in their backyard or neighborhood, besides scream?
Well, after the screaming's over. Most of the time, these animals are just passing through. If you can do things to deter them from being in your yard, bird feeders are just natural prey for squirrels, and a lot of people don't want the squirrels around, but any bird feeder is going to attract anything that's hungry. People who feed outdoor cats. You're going to end up with any other predator animal, whether it be coyotes, bobcats. They're all looking for food. Make sure your trash is either put away or it's secure in its container, maybe with a bungee cord. Anything where, if you can keep it in your garage until trash day, that's the best option. But you're going to want to make noise when you go outside. I know it sounds silly, but if you make it an uncomfortable atmosphere for them, they're going to find somewhere else to go. They're looking for a comfy place where they're going to have, you know, amenities, you know, like your local hotel. So don't give them the amenities and they will move on, you know. If it becomes more than that, obviously you can call us, but majority of the time it's going to be just a matter of learning to coexist.
Okay, yeah, coexisting sounds great. And who cares if our neighbors think we're crazy every once in a while? You walk outside making weird noises, they're like, what are you doing? And you're like, Laurie told me to do this. So Corey, from time to time we hear stories in the news and we hear about people saying maybe a bobcat or a coyote has attacked their small pet. Is this something we really need to be concerned about?
It's definitely something we need to be aware of, in the sense that if those types of animals are hanging around where you're living, you want to use those hazing techniques that Laurie was talking about earlier, because we don't want the bobcats and coyotes to feel super comfortable hanging out near our house. There are reports of that occurring very rarely. They have done studies on the coyotes in the DFW area, and they are primarily going to be eating the rabbits and the rodents. So the likelihood of that happening is extremely small, but people should pay attention, and if their small pets are going outside, you know, take them outside with supervision. You know, like Laurie said, make some noise when you go out there. Keep an eye on the backyard and watch your animals while they're outside, just to make sure that nothing like that happens. Because even an owl or some other bird of prey can come out from the sky and get a small animal. So you just want to be a good pet parent and protect your pets and keep an eye on them, almost like you would your children.
Thanks a lot, Corey. Now I've got this vision of an owl coming down and taking the Yorkie. No, but seriously, so I'm glad you kind of piggybacked on what she was saying. Laurie just told us, Corey, that we could do things like make noise when we go outside and try not to leave food out there. You know, when the animals are coming by, they won't have any food to go to. What are some other tips? What other advice do you have for us to try to keep wildlife away from our houses?
There's three things that every wild animal is going to be looking for, and that's food, some sort of shelter, and water. So the best thing for everyone to do is to kind of look around their property and eliminate those places where the animals might find those three things. So if you're feeding your own pets outside, let them eat what they're going to eat and then pick the food up and put it back inside, so it's not available for the animals. The wildlife like to hide under sheds or under decks, so you can put up barriers to make sure the animals can't hide and seek shelter in those places. And then obviously any sources of water. So standing water, make sure, and you should get rid of standing water for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is to make sure that wild animals aren't hanging out and trying to find those sources of things on your property. Trimming your bushes, picking up any ripe fruit that falls to the ground, that's a food source, because a lot of animals are omnivorous, meaning they're going to eat rodents and rats and things, but they might also eat fruits and vegetables. So making sure that you just eliminate all the sources of food, water, and shelter is basically what's going to keep those animals from hanging out around your house.
Great advice. You know, most wildlife, they probably don't have the 3-second rule. So you figure they're going to pick it up no matter how long it's there, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Lindsey, I'm glad we've been talking about things like bobcats and coyotes, but leaving pet food out can also attract other types of critters we should be aware of too, right?
Yes.
Like what?
So possums actually love cat food. So if you feed the neighborhood cats, more than likely you're also feeding possums and raccoons.
Oh boy.
So yeah, just be aware of that. And also in regards to like putting out food, it is discouraged against for feeding wildlife. So if you did want to want to feed possums and raccoons, that is, discouraged against. So just be aware of that, because if you do have like a large amount of wildlife congregating in one area, that just is a really good way to spread disease. So like distemper is kind of common in raccoons. So if you do love the wildlife and you didn't want to feed it, that's also like discouraged against. So just be aware of that.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And then also, let's go back to talking about possums. Let's just say someone has a possum problem in their backyard.
Yes.
Other than getting rid of the cat food and other types of food, what else can they do? What did you suggest for these people? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so like another thing, because possums are nocturnal and so are, also skunks too, you can also invest in floodlights. Like motion activated floodlights. It's something that would discourage them from coming into your yard. There is also motion activated sprinklers. I don't know if it just depends on how bad you wanted the possums not to come in your yard, but that is an option for you.
That's interesting.
Yeah, the motion activated sprinklers, they will spray the animal as they walk by. So you just want to make them as like uncomfortable as possible, and they'll be less likely to come into your yard.
Interesting. And kids watching right now are like, that's cool. So I'm glad that she mentioned this just a second ago. Lindsey did. Corey, and I want to come to you to get a little more information on this. We were talking about problems that people can have with rabies. And when you talk about rabies, you know, that can be quite scary. What should we know about rabies? And these animals could carry it.
Definitely, and people should definitely pay attention to rabies because it is 100% fatal. And so that is one of the primary reasons that our department exists, because we are going to follow up on any reports of bites, and most of those come from domestic animals, dogs and cats, but occasionally we'll get bites reported from wildlife as well. And so part of our job is to make sure that we're observing those animals for signs of rabies or having them tested for rabies. So it is important for people to pay attention, and as Lindsey was saying, if you're feeding animals and they're congregating and your pets, your own pets, are not vaccinated, you know, you're increasing the risk there. And Texas definitely still has rabies. The 5 species of animals that most commonly carry rabies are the skunks, bats, raccoons, foxes, and coyotes. So we call those the top 5. Most of the time it is going to be your skunks and your bats.
Okay.
So it is important to, like we were talking about, remove all those sources of food, water, and shelter so that those animals don't take up residence in your yard, so you can reduce the risk. But the most important thing is to make sure that you get your own pets vaccinated for rabies. It is required by law. It's not optional.
Good to know. So let's go over those 5 again. Skunks, bats, raccoons, possums, and
No possums.
dang darn it. Skunks, bats, raccoons,
foxes, and coyotes.
foxes, and coyotes. Okay, we've talked about those 5. Now, Lindsey, we got to talk about something else that can slither into your yards, especially around here in Texas.
Yes.
People try not to talk about it, but we've got to. Snakes. That can be a problem too, right?
Yes, we get a lot of snake calls as well. So it's definitely discouraged against handling the snakes, you know, especially if you're not familiar on like what is venomous and what is not. But yeah, if it is in your yard, you know, they do live outdoors, so it's best just to leave it alone, and they will eventually leave your yard in time. So that's just what we recommend.
That makes me feel good. I mean, some of the things you've said today, ladies, have made me go, oh no. But the fact that you say leave them alone and they should just go away, that's a good thing. But for those who are a little more curious and want to know, like, hey, is this venomous or it's not? Is there a way to figure that out without getting too close? How do you know?
Well, honestly, if you go to like Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, if you visit that website, they'll have different photos of like how you can identify the snakes. And a lot of times what is kind of like a common rule is if it has more of like a like triangle shaped head, like more of a defined shape to it, more than likely it's going to be a venomous species. If it's more circular, for the most part, it's a good chance it's not a venomous species. But yeah, and then also just color patterns and so forth, you'll be able to kind of tell. But
so this is that whole thing that we teach our kids, red and yellow, kill a fella. Is that true, or is that just something we've been saying for years?
no, that's true.
Okay. So we see red and yellow, run. Do you run from a snake?
I mean, you can.
She's like, good luck with that. Okay, so what do we do? You spot a snake in your yard. Should we call Animal Services right away? What do you recommend?
If it's in your yard, we just recommend that you leave it alone. If it is in your living quarters, so if it's located inside your home, you can call us and we'll come remove it. If it's just in your yard, we just recommend leaving it alone, and then it will kind of slither away on its own in time.
Okay. You say so. I'm like, girl, I'm going to need your help if I see one of those. Okay, let's also talk about birds, because I know a minute ago you were mentioning owls, and we know there are a number of unique and vibrant birds here in Irving, beautiful ones, including a number of ducks and cranes. So, Laurie, are there any challenges that they can present?
Definitely, especially migrating birds. They kind of take up shop in trees, and people decide, you know, that they want to cut those trees down, so that can cause an issue. We've had that in the past. Just once again, or people see them on lakes, ponds, and are convinced that maybe that bird shouldn't be there for whatever reason. It's a domestic animal in their mind, or it isn't domestic, you know, and there's so many ways that it can go, but it's just a matter of, once again, learning to coexist and maintaining, obviously, distance, so that whatever animal you're dealing with, whether it be a bird or, you know, four-legged, that they don't get too comfortable in that environment. But birds in general, you want to leave their nests alone. you don't want to move their nest unless it's an absolute necessity. And even in most cases, we tell people to contact a wildlife removal company for something like that, because birds are very protective of their nests, and human interaction with the nest can sometimes cause the bird not to come back or to, and then you end up with these orphaned babies.
Yeah.
So nobody wants that. So there's a lot of different things. We've run across quite a few owls, baby owls. They'll fall out of their nests, and people think, okay, they're definitely injured. And sometimes it's just a matter of, mom is pushing baby out, and if you leave them alone, they're gonna do what they need to do. Sometimes it doesn't always work that way, depending on the fall.
They're kind of like humans.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And then we do need to intercede, but
Okay.
sometimes you got to kind of let nature take its course too, and not jump to the conclusion that this animal is, in distress.
Gotcha. Okay, and I know that you'll also say that we shouldn't do something that I find myself doing, like feeding these birds or feeding the ducks. You don't recommend that.
No,
Why?
no. Birds, they're naturally, they fend for themselves the majority of the time, and feeding bread is this big misconception. People take dried bread and they'll collect bread at their homes to take to the local park. It's the worst thing for them. The
Tell us
starches,
more about that, because people do it so much. The starches and
the
what
starches and the yeast in the bread causes all kinds of issues for a lot of different animals, because it does expand. So and geese especially, they can be aggressive depending on the time of year and if they have a nest, if it's during mating season. So then you're getting all that stirred up too. So you'll see a lot of birds when they're nesting, there'll be one that's kind of circling around and the one that is sitting by the nest. And then people are like, you have to come get this out of here. And you can't do that. I mean, that's the spot they've chosen, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And we kind of have to work around that.
Interesting. Okay, true story here. When you said that, I've probably experienced every single thing we're talking about here today. It's been a crazy life for me. But I was out jogging one day, and literally, like, birds just started zooming down towards my head, like for no reason. I thought, later to find out, there was a bird's nest in this tree that was passing by. I was running for my life, like this little bird was going to kill me. People thought I was crazy, but that happens.
Yes.
They are very protective.
Oh, definitely.
You got to be careful, and you can't blame them. They think you're after their babies. I'm
Right.
like, I'm just trying to make it to mile 3.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Speaking of making it, I want to switch a little bit and move from birds, Corey, to talking about something I see people complaining about a lot here, and that's feral hogs. How big of a concern is that here in Irving?
It's definitely a concern, and Texas has the highest population of feral hogs anywhere in the country,
Wow.
so it's definitely a battle. And they are not a native wildlife species. They were brought here and managed to reproduce like crazy. They have a really negative impact on our water systems, and they do a lot of property damage. So again, not a native species, causing a lot of damage to the environment. So we get a lot of activity around the rivers, and obviously we have both forks of the Trinity, so we do get a lot of activity with them with the property damage. So we do work with the USDA to try to manage that population so that we don't see a negative impact on our water sources and all of the native environment that's around there. Because if you don't know anything about pigs, they like to root and get down underneath things and eat all the grubs and things underneath there, so they can do a lot of damage. They also like to wallow in the mud, which also destroys the things that are along the riverbanks. If you happen to live in an area where you're experiencing problems with feral hogs, one of the best things you can do is treat your property for grubs. Make sure you put down things in your lawn and your grassy areas that will get rid of the worms and grubs that are underneath that grass.
Wow.
You can get those things at the local hardware store, and that should deter the pigs from being near your property. But they do definitely travel along the rivers. It's like a highway for feral hogs.
Wow, great advice. And those things can run fast too.
They're bigger than you think.
Yes.
Yes, so that's definitely a species you want to stay away from. You don't have any
Exactly.
business getting close to them. They can be really dangerous if they feel like they need to do something. But generally, they're going to be moving through and eating during the nighttime hours. So most of the time, you're not going to see them during the day.
That's good. Okay, Laurie, we're going to talk about something now, animals that people do love to talk about and to see, and that's dogs and cats. But how often do you get calls about stray ones here in Irving?
Oh, a lot. I couldn't give you an actual number, it varies from day to day, but a huge percentage of our calls are about seeing strays, or somebody's picked up a stray, or just any type of report on an animal.
So tell us about the Strays Off the Street program.
So that's a program that was initiated to help animals get back to their owners. We encourage microchipping. At the very least, have a tag on your dog with the dog's name, your name, phone number, address, so that if somebody picks up the dog, they can hopefully make contact with you that way. If the dog is microchipped, you know, people pick up animals and they know to either bring it to us to get it scanned, or, you know, they'll take it to a local veterinarian and get it scanned, or we can pick it up in the field and scan it and hopefully make contact with the owner, so it never has to come into the shelter. Because no matter how you know, that's best case scenario, is to always keep animals out of the shelter.
Yeah.
I mean, we're proud of what we do, but we don't want that kind of stress and trauma on any animal. It's just like, I'm sure you wouldn't want it on yours.
Right.
You know, so it's a really good program to help us alleviate some of that on both ends, for the owner of the dog, for the dog, and for us.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned that people sometimes bring these animals into shelters or bring them into you. Is that what you recommend? Say someone's out walking and they see a stray dog, or they see a litter of kittens. What do you recommend they do?
Well, it depends on the situation, obviously. If they feel confident and comfortable that the dog isn't going to harm them, and, you know, they say they, you know, can confine the dog in their vehicle or something like that, great. You know, they can contact us and, you know, bring it to the shelter, or we open at 1 o'clock, so they can do intakes after 1 o'clock. If it's before that, they can contact us about, you know, possibly an officer meeting them somewhere. There's a lot of variables, but what you really are looking for is just to make sure that it's a safe environment. If they're young kittens, in the springtime we have so many kittens, and people will be, there's kittens here and, you know, you need to come get them, or they're crawled under here and they're teeny tiny. Well, we encourage people to leave them alone, just like baby bunnies. Leave them alone, because their mom is probably out somewhere hunting or whatever. She will come back. If she doesn't come back and you don't see her in a day or so, then contact us. Then they're at risk. But right now, they're just being animals, so don't touch them. Same thing with, you know, if you see cats, feral cats, people think, oh, this cat is lost. Do not touch a feral cat. Cat bites and scratches are serious.
Yikes.
And, you know, you think it's really friendly, and it may come over and rub on your leg because it's used to being fed by maybe the neighborhood. Just people that think, oh, well, I'll feed these kitties.
Sure,
Great,
right.
you know, but then you try and reach down and pick it up, and that's a whole different story. So we just encourage people, don't interact with feral cats.
Well, thank you
Okay.
for sharing that message. You know, there are some people watching right now that may be thinking to themselves, I want to help out. If a resident is concerned and wants to help out and make a difference, what can they do to provide shelter for these dogs and cats?
Well, the best thing to do is, obviously, you don't want to provide temporary shelter. You want to get them to where they need to be, so that if they are homeless, for instance, we can get them vaccinated, and we can get them spayed or neutered, and get them adopted out to a lifetime family. So that's the biggest goal. People think that, you know, I'll help this animal and I'll do this, and then it doesn't go as well as they're hoping for, and then you have more bad outcome of that. So, you know, anytime you're seeing an animal, you're interacting with an animal, just think, you know, how would you feel if that was your animal? And just because you think, oh, well, that's probably, nobody owns it, I'll help it. Well, it could be somebody's dog or cat. It
Yeah.
could be somebody's baby.
True.
So you want to make sure that that baby's getting home.
Very good. Okay, so Corey, let's recap a bit.
Okay.
Someone's tuning in right now. They want to know, what's the most important thing that residents need to know about urban wildlife here in Irving?
Don't make your yard friendly for them. So we talked about removing sources of food, water, and shelter so that they don't take up residence in your yard. And then when you're out and about and you see them around, if they are hanging out around people and don't seem to have much fear, the best thing you can do is make noise and what we call hazing. Make sure that they don't feel comfortable hanging around humans, because that's where we get into these conflicts. That's where we have these situations where Animal Services needs to respond. So check your property, remove all sources of food, water, and shelter, and if animals are hanging out and not going away and being easily spooked off, do your best to be scary.
You mentioned calling for animal services. So Laurie, when should someone call? Under what circumstances? When do they need to contact you?
Well, obviously, first and foremost, any type of bite. That's with the rabies that Corey talked about. You want to make sure that's a priority in everybody's life, is making sure that their pets and themselves and their community is safe from that. Anytime you see a sick or injured animal, an animal that's been hit by a car, anytime you see something strange, animals left alone for too long, say a neighbor's, not been responding. Sometimes there could be a health issue. Sometimes they could be out of town and think somebody else is watching the animal that isn't. Anything that you're noticing that is unusual in your day-to-day life for, say, a neighbor or a friend. It's just important that we all kind of check up on each other because obviously animals can't talk. They can't call us and say, we need you. So we need, citizens to kind of step in where they can't.
There you go. Yeah, makes sense. And lastly, Lindsey, I'm going to come to you with this. What can we as humans do to truly coexist with wildlife native to us here in this area and make it a better place for all of us to live?
Yeah. Maybe just understanding that, some of the wildlife is definitely, harmless, like possums are actually good to have around. But yeah, and also just make sure not to feed them, to keep them healthy and not spread disease as well.
Awesome. Now for those who are listening right now, watching right now, and they're like, okay, how do I contact you, Corey? How do they get in touch if they do need help or they have more questions or concerns or just want to get more information?
We are on the city's website, and there's lots of information posted there. We also have a Facebook page and an Instagram page where you can follow kind of what's going on at Animal Services. But the easiest way, if you're experiencing something and you need to get a hold of us, is to call the phone number, which is 972-721-2256. And if for some reason you're having an emergency after hours, you can always call the police non-emergency number, and they know exactly how to get a hold of us.
I'm glad how you said that non-emergency number. So when you see like a possum or raccoon or bobcat or maybe even a snake, we should not dial 911.
You really shouldn't, unless there's some, public safety threat or something going on. But if it's just the matter of seeing the animal, and it's a little bit scary because we don't know a lot about what bobcats are really there for, wait for Animal Services to be on duty, and we'll happily tell you all you want to know about bobcats.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you for all you do. We appreciate you being here. All right, it's Corey Price, Laurie Hullinger, and Lindsey Hayes. And again, we thank them for being a part of Open Line today. And well, that will do it for this edition of Open Line. Thank you so much for watching. I think we all learned something about the wildlife in our area. I'm Starlene Stringer. I'll see you next time.